the wife, she actually tried to sabotage our company. We couldn't get our license for a year. Despite college degrees that my wife had, like all the nursing and stuff, she had to have like one specific. So we had to keep the owner's wife on for a year because she had been working in that space and she was staying on as our CEO. And things just started spiraling. Like she became very negative about the sale because I guess she didn't want the sale of the company to go on. And, we said to ourselves, we said, man, she's going to try to do something to the company. She's going to try to sabotage it.
Hold up, why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me. You waiting on the boy to fail, then hold your breath and face your death. Cause you play a roulette with each step I progress, no less. Go ahead and place your bets, cause we know where we at, we know we top tier. Cause all the hate that you bring, we know it stops here. I'm taking off like a rocketeer, ain't stopping here. It's strange how they cannot see the future, but see profit here. Wait up.
All right, so have you ever been to a fair or a festival or your favorite local spot? And there's all these crazy food trucks with elephant ears and fried this and fried Oreos and fried everything else and great walking tacos and anything else that you can think of from a food truck. And you wondered, I wonder who built this shit. Well, today's a special episode for you because I got my guy, Justin Prestige, who is one of the largest food truck manufacturers in the country, here on the show today. Justin, welcome to the Maxed Out podcast with, me. What's up, man? How you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good, Todd. It's always good to see you. Next time we do this, it's got to be in person, but I'm super happy to be here with you.
No. If I wasn't important enough to fly in and see and sit down in the couch beside me, I get it. I understand. Not a big deal.
Oh, you're so important that I couldn't delay it. It's like, well, I could do it in person, in a month from now, but I didn't want to delay it, so here we are. And but I'm very excited. I have just have so much respect for you, and so super happy to be with you today.
Well, the feeling is likewise, and that's why you're on the show today. And a lot of people, the people that follow you, people that don't know you, people that are going to see you, yes, we're going to talk about your great entrepreneurial journey, and specifically with the food truck industry. But they also don't know you're a reality TV star too. That's where we met, on the Blox. We were both judges on there. That was a couple years back now, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. And reality TV star would be like, that's the biggest stretch that you could pull there. As your audience probably knows by now, that you were on the Blox that's run by Wes Bergman. Okay, he's the real reality TV star. He's a friend of mine here in Kansas City. I've known him for 11 years now. And even to this day, if I'm out with him, people will come up to him and ask him for a selfie or whatever, and he'll oblige. And I joke with him that they must know him from the Blox, the show, not all his other shows that have been on every major network out there, so my joke is like, wow, they must really love entrepreneurship if they're coming up to you and asking for selfies, which is, of course, not how any of us are truly known. So, but it's even though we're in our own small bubble on that show, The Blox, it is so much fun. It's such a blast to do. And it's just such a the reason I love it is nothing to do with it, being a TV show. It's such a great tool and community for the entrepreneurs that are privileged enough to come through it. And part of the reason is that they get coached by people like you, who are experienced entrepreneurs who have done it the hard way. And guys like you and I, we've been through the trenches and we've experienced some success. And so to be able to look back at these entrepreneurs who are getting started and speak into their lives and give them some hope and see some of those light bulbs go off for them, that's the greatest thing in the world. Like, I would do that all day, every day, if that was an option for me. And so being able to be part of that has been such a blast.
Yeah, the Blox was a really cool experience for me, and I think my feelings towards it was like it's not some big huge show, right? Like, it's not. Of course, Wes Bergman is the founder of it, and people have seen. I used to watch him when I was younger and on MTV Real World, and he's probably been on the most challenges out of anybody besides Johnny Bananas or a couple of those guys, right? Or at least equal to him. But a lot of people don't know the backstories at why he was doing all this. He was building this really cool small business incubator out in Kansas City. I'd never heard of it until I got the invitation to be a judge on the show. And it was kind of a cool setup, right? Like they brought in entrepreneurs from all around the country. I think for our season there was like maybe 70 or something like that, and they all competed all week long, and there was 7 of us judges, and I still talk or have communication with pretty much all the judges except for one. And that was like one of the coolest things about the show was like you immediately when we met all the other judges, like one, you're nervous because you're like, I hadn't ever really done a TV show. I'd done other things. I speak in front of people. I don't get nervous real easy. But as you're meeting the judges, as they kind of trickle in the first day, you're like, all right, do I belong in this room? Do I not belong in this room? What's this guy's specialty? What's not? And I think what I learned very quickly was, man, it was a powerful group of judges that all were having really good success in entrepreneurship and all different walks of life. I mean, like, Wendell reality TV show, won the Survivor. Michael is in North Carolina who has like one of the fastest growing companies in the region, in the country, Next Level Technicians, Heidi out in California, who had one of the largest, traveling art galleries and like a lot of other stuff, like Adam Hanna, who's huge in the security industry. Just so many cool people, man. Like, and it was such a fun experience. And we're going to dive into that because I think it's important for people to understand as we talk about like networking and putting yourself out and self-education. I think it's important, but your story specifically, though, you're like a lot of my friends, a lot of guests that I have on the show. You didn't come from some rich upbringing or silver spoon in your mouth or a family full of entrepreneurs. So, what got you into entrepreneurship? And was the food truck industry, was that your first kind of entrepreneurial journey, or where'd you start at?
Yeah, it's a great question. And no, the food truck stuff, I really just stumbled into that along the way. And so I had, up until that point, I had helped several businesses where, I had worked my way up to where I was managing those businesses. And so I knew I liked it from that perspective. And the more I got into it, I think we all have these experiences where it's like I worked for some terrible owners,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized like, oh, if I owned the company, I would do it like this, XYZ or whatever. And in a real light bulb moment for me was when I was managing a company. I had a boss come and tell me, well, you're not performing well enough. And I said, okay, like based on what? Like, what can I improve on specifically? Because I feel like I'm killing it. And he said, literally said, I don't know. You're just not doing good enough. Well, the reality is he had someone in his ear feeding him negative information about me. And so he turned that into, I just need to do better, but he couldn't point to anything specific. And so I literally in that moment remember thinking, well, I'll never be caught in this moment again. So I'm going to create my own measurables. And so I took all the information that I could get and I went back 3 years of like how many units sold did we do, how many deliveries did we make, like all these things, and put all these measurables in place so that we could track it moving forward. And I even at that point called him back 2 weeks later and said, hey, our sales were up 20% last month and our payroll was down 10%. So when you're telling me I'm not performing well enough, I need you to be more specific, because right now it looks pretty good. And so being armed with that type of thing was really important. But that's where I started to really learn, like, it's not crazy complicated. There are ways that you can manage and measure and figure out whether you're doing well or not. And it has nothing to do with, like, so many times our egos and emotions get
Mm-hmm.
involved in things, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so I helped turn things around with that company, and helped, just by being armed with that, helped him realize, like, oh, the person who's talking bad about me doesn't actually know what they're talking about. It's not based on facts. So he and I were able to clear the air. But anyway, eventually I got to a point where a guy asked me to help him with this online cargo trailer dealership that they were trying to start. And so I did that. And so I managed it for a year, but I'm really big on, hey, just let the market tell you what direction you need to go in. And so I felt like this was in 2011, and I felt like there was room where people were asking if we do food trucks in a trailer, a food trailer. And so of course I had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, yeah, we do that. And so I figured it out and sold one. And it was way more expensive than anything else we were selling. And so I went to the owner at that point and said, "Hey, I think we actually really need to pay attention to this and focus on it." And he told me, "No, you'll never sell enough of those to make it." And I thought, that's really interesting. He's not going to listen to the market, and he wants to just keep going the direction he's been going in. And so 6 months later or so, the opportunity came up to buy the company from him. He didn't want to do it anymore. I got it pretty cheap. Turns out it's because it wasn't worth anything at the time. And so um, in January of 2012, I bought the company, took it in a different direction, rebranded it, and really started focusing on food trailers. In 2015, I converted to where that's the only thing we're going to sell. And all of that was just following the market and letting my customers tell me what their values were. And that's what's enabled me to become one of the largest food truck dealers in the country. And so now, I mean, we've got trailers in Hawaii and Alaska and the Virgin Islands and Maine and Montana and Florida and Texas and everywhere in between. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we became very, very, very good at one thing. And being very good at the one thing means that we're the source for a lot of people for that thing.
Sure.
So I don't care about food trucks at all. That's the weird thing. But I love helping people out in entrepreneurship. And so even as we're talking about like coaching entrepreneurs and startups, it's a great fit because all my customers are startups now. And so instead of just selling a product, we coach them on how to start well and how to actually set their business up for success along the way while they're buying this product from us. So it's been a really good fit for me and for us. And just, this is the longest answer you've probably ever gotten to this question, but what was me by myself in a one-room office for years now, where we've got 20 employees, and in all of them are just high quality, high character individuals who love showing up to work every day. They want to do a good job for our customers. And so that part of it has actually been a surprisingly meaningful part to me, is to build that team of really special individuals to come in together and to get to do this every day with them. That's been amazing to see all of that play out. So again, none of us, the food truck is just, it's just the vehicle, so to speak, that we get to carry out a lot of our passions through. And so that's been a really, really fun part of this journey.
Well, I think you said it right there towards the end of that, which, I preach to people, especially in my industry, in the real estate industry. I tell them all the time, like, don't forget it's a people's game, and it's all about relationships, right? And some people, they want to pump a pipeline, and that's fine. It's just about the dollar. But in anything that you do in entrepreneurship, it's about building relationships and creating an experience where somebody really believes that you added value to their life, and not just a one-time piece of value, but value overall, right? And because you became an entrepreneur the way that you did, because you've been involved in the Blox and got used to coaching, and not just coaching people in a food truck industry, but coaching entrepreneurs from, there was, look, I'm going to tell the story. Our season that we was out there, one of the people in my pod was an entrepreneur who had been writing sex novels, and they were a little more intense than just a sex novel, right?
Right.
And when that person was in my pod, she'd already been in the pod with a couple of you to begin with, and you guys, we kind of joked about it at night, and I was nervous going into that pod because I knew I was going to have to coach this person, and I said to myself, I don't know how in the world I'm going to be able to give good advice to this person. I was actually stressed about it because I wanted to give everybody the most of me. I wanted to give everybody the best that I give. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to coach this person. But once we got in that pod, it wasn't any different than coaching any other business. The specifics are a little bit different, right? Like, well, how do you market a food truck compared to marketing as a realtor, right? Like, those things are going to be different. But the overall business coaching, it's all about the same, okay? Unless you're talking about taking a company public and things like that,
Right.
But I think that you said that you're creating an experience for your customers, and you care more about the experience than the actual product. You want the quality to be there. You want it to be great and solve issues, but you get more enjoyment out of kind of helping that customer along and seeing the success of some people. But I do want to unpack something that you said a minute ago, and maybe have you touch on that a second. When they told you that you weren't performing, and you went back and you created, the metrics and was able to give the information. Like, I've carried that because I had a similar situation with me. A boss that just didn't like me, and like, oh, you're not doing a good job, you're not doing a good job. And I learned as an employee at that time, tell me why I'm not doing a good job and give me the specifics, right? And I got really good at like challenging what was actually happening. And I've carried that with me in all of my businesses. Like when my employees, or especially my administrators, come to me, and one topic that popped up was like overtime. I was questioning one of our administrators about overtime. He's like, "Oh no, like our overtime's in check. Like it's we're doing a lot better this week." And I said, "Okay, well let me pull the report real quick." It took me 30 seconds to pull, and I'm like, "You haven't decreased our overtime in the last 2 months, right?" And I think we had like 634 hours of overtime, you know.
Wow.
And I said, "Do you did you even look at the number before you gave me a bullshit answer?" And
Right.
most of the time they don't. People just want to talk, and they want to try to bullshit you and get you through there. And I'm so big with that is give me the metrics, give me the specifics. It comes to hiring. Well, I can't. We were talking about like our diverse workforce, and I'm like, you're only getting people from this specific neighborhood in this specific age group. Like, why can't we create this diverse? Well, these are the only people applying. I'm like, well, why? Like, why? Like,
Right.
let's dig in and find out why. Don't just tell me that that's the reason. Like, why is this happening? And then we can dissect it backwards. And I think that's big for any business. And I imagine you kind of carry that same philosophy uh, with with your food truck right now. Is like, you probably don't want employees that just bullshit you, right? Like, you put a new
For
grill in
sure.
one of these things, and they're like, oh, well, it's not functioning correctly. Well, not just because the manufacturer sent you this grill that's in this shape. Like, let's dig down and figure out exactly why. Maybe we got to move a screw over half inch or whatever. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'd imagine that's a part of your business, right? Is like really getting
Well,
into the
for
numbers.
sure. Yeah, and it brings accountability to myself, right? Because it's like, well, I don't want to be the same boss that I had a problem with. And so even in our hiring process, we do a really good job at communicating with our team. Here's our expectations for you. Here's how we expect you to perform. And here's the measurables that we're going to be using along the way. And if at any point you're not in alignment with us in these areas, that's actually fine. It just means we're not a good fit.
Sure.
And so I've had the most peaceful firings where we go, hey, remember we set this up and we said if you're not doing this and you're not doing it, you've got one chance to turn that around and change it if that's something that you're interested in. If you don't think you can actually turn it around and improve it, then that's fine. We need to part ways. And I've had people go like, yeah, you're right. I don't think I'm a good fit.
Yeah.
Peace out. Okay, great. And I have people who have left under those circumstances that I'm still friends with, and we text. It's like the weirdest deal,
Sure.
but because those healthy expectations were set from the beginning, it just helps everything go so much smoother. And so, yeah, we have very specific measurables that we go by, and accountability, and it's a lot of it's accountability that's built in to make sure I'm treating the employees fairly, and I don't have just unspoken expectations that I'm expecting them to perform by. And then on top of that, our systems and processes and procedures, we do build, measure, learn all the time, which is part of the curriculum. That's part of the blocks. And at first you're kind of taught to apply that to your product, but we apply it to literally every process that we have, internal, external, whatever it is. We are evaluating our processes all the time.
Yeah. And I think you have
And
to,
so,
like, you can't lose sight of it,
yeah,
right?
right. And so the longer we've done it, my business partner and I have looked at each other and smiled because we realize like the problems that we're solving right now are the exact right problems to solve. The little stuff that, 2, 3 years ago was such a pain for us, we've solved those. We don't have to solve those anymore. And the system works. We have, a lot of that stuff is on autopilot because the people working here know their role, they know what's expected of them, and they're crushing it because of that. And so now it's like, okay, well, what's next? We're dissecting like how to expand our marketing or things like that, where it's like, yeah, these are the really good problems for us to be as owners, this is what we need to be focused on. I don't need to be focused on, hey, the floor didn't get swept last night before you guys left the shop. Who's responsible for that or whatever. Like that stuff is all we've already solved those problems.
Well, it's the working on your business instead of working in your business, and that's where you
Right.
should be at as a business owner. You should be able to be the visionary of your organizations, of your companies, and have phenomenal staff that will carry out your vision, right? But I think a lot of young entrepreneurs, not even just young entrepreneurs, but newer entrepreneurs and some even more seasoned entrepreneurs, one of the things they struggle with is knowing when to cut ties with an employee or administrator, or the higher up they go, it becomes harder. And that is hard. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid of those hard conversations, but when you
Right.
do what you do, which is you set clear expectations up front, those conversations become so much easier. And I had my business mentor at the time. I actually was the vice president of his company for a while, and I remember when I had to fire my first person. Um, and he had given me some advice, and I'm like, I don't know about it, but it was all about the expectations and setting them up right at the beginning. And that way, when you come back, you're like, there is no hidden piece of it. Like, here's what we said you had to do. You didn't do it. So we have to separate. But going back further than that, my law enforcement days, the last 6 years, I was an investigator, organized retail crime and internal investigations for Macy's. I traveled the country, interrogated people, get them to tell me the worst shit that they had done and stolen from the store and all the employees. And I remember the first time that I had to fire an employee, which was the first time I ever fired an employee. I was very nervous, and I asked my boss at the time, and he was a New York dude, right? Like, I said, well, how do I do it? He's like, well, what do you mean? How do you do it? Like, do what? I said, well, how do I fire this person? And he said, just punch him in the throat. I said, well, I don't want to get HR called on me. Like, what do you mean? And
Right.
and that was some of the best advice that I ever got, and I still use it to people, which is just rip the Band-Aid off. And
Right.
and ripping the Band-Aid off and being very direct with people in everything that you do in business, especially your employees, that's the best approach. But it's much easier when you've set up the proper expectations at the beginning, because then
Right.
there is no backtracking. Like, if you say, hey, we got to let you go today because you've been 23 minutes late 4 days of the week, the last 4 weeks. Well, if you've never set up what the attendance expectations were or what
Right.
those are, people are like, well, I didn't know that you really cared about that. But if you've done it at the beginning, there is no argument, right? Like, that's just kind of the way that it
100%.
goes.
Right. And I just was interviewing a guy who's in my world is you know an industry leader, and one of the things that he was talking about is, as he has managed many restaurants over the years, it's just a similar philosophy in it. And when he gave warnings to somebody, hey, if this keeps happening, I'm going to let you go. And when I say I'm going to let you go, I just want you to know how serious I am. I'm not a liar. Anything you hear me say is going to be the truth, positive or negative. And so don't keep doing this thinking that you're going to make a liar out of me, that I'm not actually going to get rid of you if this continues. And so he said, setting that expectation has been really helpful. And he had somebody who literally he had that conversation with, and the next day repeated the same exact behavior. And he had to come in and say, I told you, please don't try and make me a liar, because it's not going to happen. That's not who I am. So we're letting you go. Here's why. And the guy literally goes, yeah, I get it. Thanks. Shook his hand and walked out. It's like, okay, that's a very clearly, he set the expectation. I love the principle of it. Like, if I don't follow through, that means I've lied to you
Hmm.
about this process. That's not who I am. I'm
Sure.
not someone who lies. So don't try to make me out to be that person, but it
Yeah.
also takes resolve. Don't say stuff that you're not actually willing to follow through on, is the other part of that. It can be tempting in the moment to say, hey, you better straighten up or else this is going to happen. And then you drag your feet, you don't follow through on it. Like, that's such a bad precedent. So if you want to lose your workforce, that's a really quick way to do it, where guys people don't respect you for, acting that way. If they see your pushover, they are going to push those boundaries every time.
Yeah. Years ago, I created, because at one point there was like 300-400 people that were working underneath of me, within a certain region before I was an entrepreneur. And I created like a little 3-step process for coaching employees, and it's the I like, I love, I need. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but every
Hmm.
conversation I had with employees was always the same. I like the way that you did XXXX. I love how, whatever, fill in the blank, you're always 15 minutes early. You're ready to work as soon as the day goes. I need you to become more
Right.
focused in blank, 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 blank. And if you don't, then we're going to do XXX. And it's very clear expectations. And you could write it on a piece of paper. It's like, I like, I love, you're setting them up, you're giving them positive, then you're telling them exactly what I need you to do and what the end result is going to be. And like you said, you have to follow through on exactly what you say you're going to do, not just for that person, but for everybody else that's watching that, right? Because the worst
Right.
thing in entrepreneurship when you have employees is if you're dealing with any HR issues, because of confidentiality and things like that, you can't go tell everybody what's happening with everybody else. So the only truth that people get of what's going on in your workplace when there's discipline is what that disciplined employee tells them, right?
Right.
And the only clear messages you send is when there's a clear message of discipline or whatever that other employees will see, because that sets the tone. And if you have an employee going, yeah, they talked to me, but I've been late 27 times and no big deal. I told them they can't fire me. They can't do shit. That's the story that those people really believe, because we don't run out and
Right.
say, I want you to know I set them down. I put them on vinyl corrective warning, and here's what happens. They have one more chance. People don't know that. So sometimes if employees try to stretch you, you got to separate that. And that sends a message to everybody else.
Well, yeah, and there's nothing worse that, like, we've all been in jobs where you have that coworker who sucks and also is allowed to continue in their behavior. And there's nothing that's more demoralizing when you come and you care and you're putting the effort in, is this guy over here is being lazy, what disrespectful, shows up late, leaves early, all the things, and nothing ever happens to that person. Well, again, the leadership is communicating very clearly in that case, even by just being passive. That's very clear communication on what's going to happen to somebody, which is nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
so now everybody loses their motivation, and again, things can go south very quickly when that's the case. And so I get to the point where I'm like, yeah, as hard as it is to talk to that person and fire them and follow through with that or whatever the case may be, it's also really unfair to not do it. It's unfair to the good employees who are
Right.
showing up and killing it. And so I don't want to be unfair to those guys. And honestly, every time that I've had to have one of those conversations, there is a huge exhale that everybody has when it's over,
Sure.
including myself, but everybody around also can sense it and feel it. And there's tension there, and it's stressful to be around that other employee, all those things. And so there's actually this big relief when you can deal with it and get it over with. So that's, yeah, anybody who's struggling with that, just get it over with. I hate seeing it. I saw somebody the other day who said, an entrepreneur who's a business owner said, I'm in a situation, I have this problem where I can't run my business without this key employee, but I also can't make money with her there
Mm-hmm.
because she is sabotaging what I'm doing. And my immediate reaction is like, that perspective is so twisted, and you've got to either fix it or you can't be the owner of that company, because if an employee is leading you around that way, and they're the ones holding the leash that's around your neck, then you've got it backwards. If you can't make money with them, but you can't run without them, you're a terrible owner. And you've got to look yourself in the mirror and figure that out, because that's a really, really unhealthy place to be.
Yeah, for sure. I have because I'm in the real estate world and kind of all the other things that we do. I mean, we're, even building car washes and things like that. I tell some of my contractors all the time, and some of my contractors are rough, right? Like, just what it is. But I tell them all the time when they start getting, they'll have, a conversation, they're unhappy about something or they want to get shitty with me about something. Not very often. I have some really, really great guys and gals that work for me. But there's a couple times where I said, listen, I'm an entrepreneur. And I said, okay, what do you like? Whatever, we know that. I'm like, the reason I became an entrepreneur, a big reason, is because I get to decide how my life operates. That also means I get to decide who I got to work with every single day. And I don't
Right.
work with people that I don't like. And right now, I can't stand you. So fix it. And that's kind of how I live my business, right? Like I just did this a couple weeks ago. I had somebody that was working for me, and it was something small, right? Like there was some little rumor stuff that was going on back in their town, and I'm like, I'm not involved in drama or any of that stuff, right? Like, get out of here if you're involved in that. But
Right.
they were a contractor; they were working for me. There was some stuff between some kids going back and forth, their kids and some other kids, and it was getting back to me through like one of the kids that played baseball for me, and I just let the person, yeah, I just let him go. I said, look, we're not going to use you anymore for work, and they were really upset. And I said, I don't think you heard me when I said that I get to choose as an entrepreneur who I get to work with every single day. And if your drama becomes my drama, I'm cutting
Right.
it out. I'm cutting out negativity very, very fast. I will not put up with the shit. And if people are going in entrepreneurship, they shouldn't, right? Because that drags us down. And one employee can drag your company down like so bad. And you're right when you said it, like there's like an exhale that happens because when you get rid of one of those negative employees, it's like everybody else like, well, I didn't want to tell you that this was going on or this was
Right.
happening or blah, 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 blah. Like, you know that if you're stressed and tensed about the situation about an employee, that everybody else is feeling it 100 times worse. They're just afraid to come to you and be that snitch, right? Because, you know, snitches get stitches. But
Right.
for me, that's not it. Snitches for me get bonuses.
Right.
That's the rule of the
Exactly.
workplace.
Well, and I think it's one of the hardest things as entrepreneurs is that we have to recognize as we grow our businesses, there are different stages of your business. And so when you start, it's survival mode.
Hmm.
Like you're scrappy, you have to wear all the hats, you got to do all the roles, and you have to do just whatever it takes to get one more dollar to come into the door, you know? And so that's a different mindset and mentality to when you then have 5 employees. But now your main priority you cannot continue looking at your business the way that you did before. Now you have to shift and look at it a little bit differently, and you have to be focused on managing those employees well. And maybe you're an entrepreneur, like so many entrepreneurs are great starters and they have vision and all that, but then when it comes to executing on the little things or the day in day out, they get so bored. I don't want to manage my employees. I hate managing employees. I'd rather just go talk to my customers all day long and keep getting sales or whatever it is.
Sure.
But it's one of the hardest things I've seen for people is you have to transition for every stage that you're at. You have to be able to recognize where you're at with that stage, and then you have to think about it differently and look at it differently. It's like having kids, you know, it's like when you've got a toddler, you talk to them in a different way than you do your teenagers. But you're with that kid every day, day in and day out. So it's not like you wake up one day and you go, oh, yeah, now I need to be this type of parent for that child. So it's really hard to recognize those stages when it's this slow, gradual thing. But if you can't make those shifts, it's, you know, I've heard so many people complain like, oh, the growth phase of my business is what put me under. It's the most difficult part. You know, when I was broke and it was just me, I was like, okay, stop complaining about the growth phase. Like, I'm really having a hard time feeling sorry for you that
Right.
you're making too much money and that's hard for you. Like, what are you talking about? And then I hit the growth phase. I was like, yeah, this really sucks if you don't handle it right. If you
Sure.
handle it properly, then it can be a really fun stage. But there's a lot of stuff that you're going to be able to figure out in a short amount of time. If you cannot adjust for that and adjust for the different stages, there one of those stages, it will either knock you back significantly or knock you out of it altogether if you're not adjusting your focus fast enough.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's talk about the blocks a little bit. And I think that's a unique concept, actually, if we, take a couple steps back and we really talk about what it is. Yes, it was when we met, it was a TV show about entrepreneurs in reality that was being filmed. But, I talk a lot with, young investors, people that follow me on my social medias. I talk a lot about self educating yourself and investing back into yourself, whether that's paying to be in masterminds and rooms that maybe that you don't belong in, that you're trying to put
Right.
yourself in front of crowds. Maybe it's, investing in a mentor or a business coach or whatever. But what I really like about the blocks, and I've never done it, okay, but the blocks started, and how Wes started that was like a small business incubator, right, in Kansas City. And a lot of people, that is like foreign terminology to them. Like, what is an incubator? And I think anybody can Google what an incubator is, what the definition of an incubator is, which is to grow something. Basically, I don't know what the real definition is, but
Right.
that's the simple term. But talk to me about that. Like how, because you did some of the stuff when it was just the incubator before it turned into the TV show. And if we're talking to like some younger entrepreneurs and some small business people, because I think often people struggle with finding people in their lives that give them good advice, because most people in their lives when they're starting out are not
Right.
other entrepreneurs. How important was being a part of that, like kind of small incubator, small business incubator? How important was that to you in your entrepreneurial journey, if it was? And do you recommend that to people? And even people are saying, well, why would I spend money to go to this place and have people teach me how to do business? Like,
Right. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I genuinely don't think my business would have survived had I not joined that community. And maybe there's a, I'm scrappy, maybe there's a different community that I would have found life in. But in 2014 is when I went through the incubator, and I joke about it with Wes Bergman all the time. He and I've been friends since I went through it, and I joke about it with him, like, yeah, we both met each other at the early stages of our businesses, and both of our businesses sucked pretty bad at that point. But what's grown out of it has been amazing. And so even for what it was, I can't. The first time I went to it, I thought I was going to get murdered, because he gives you an address to go to, and he says just go inside and you'll hit the down button on the elevator. And so it's a parking lot. That the parking lot has its own address. But when he says go inside, what he doesn't explain is there's no building there. There's a there's a room that's the size of like a telephone booth that you go into, and the only thing that's there is a down elevator. That's it. And so I go down 20 stories underground. This incubator is taking place in caves under downtown Kansas City. And so it's these old salt mines or whatever they are, and that have now, dried up. And so it's all this underground storage, but they converted, a bunch of it to these underground offices, which in my opinion is like a terrible idea. It's low ceilings, it's fluorescent lights, it's dark. He's painted the walls neon green. Like, I thought I was gonna just throw up the first time I had to go to a class down there. So it's really rough, but the idea behind it was brilliant, was awesome. And so the content that I got out of it was amazing. So it's really fun to go through and just get some of the basic fundamentals of how to operate, not business, but specifically startups. Because all the college programs that were available, if you wanted to go to college for business, you were being educated on how to plug into a bigger business. So you might be educated on how to manage within a large business, but there's very little resources for true startups that spoke to you like, hey, if you're at point zero or even pre-launch, we're going to give you tools to be successful. So for me, that was massively helpful to just plug into a community. And so anything that you can do, and I qualify it like, hey, your uncle who's never owned his own business but has a strong opinion on what you should do, that's not what I'm talking about when I say get people around you that you're getting input from. It's guys who have experienced success, people who have been there and done that, and it's people who are genuinely interested in your well-being. And so if you can, when I talk about startup, and I still am involved with it as startup coaching, but it's one of the things, like, you can talk kind of X's and O's, but one of the things that's not covered in X's and O's is I tell people build your community, because on your journey, it is going to get tough. There are going to be times where you're going to want to quit. And if you can't figure out a way to push through that, like the guys who are successful, all the most successful entrepreneurs that you can think of, they're the ones who have figured out how to push past all the places where other people have given up and gone home.
sure.
And like, Todd, I know you've done that. Like, we talk, I've heard you talk about with the other guests, like, it might look like an overnight success that you have or something like that, or hey, you're so lucky you get all this stuff. But the reality is, it is the fruit of doing the work that other people just aren't willing to do, and pushing through the nights that other people would quit and go home if they had to endure it. So there's all those things built in. So, and without community, it's nearly impossible to do it. And so finding that community for me was great. It was really fun to go through it in 2014, and then be invited back in 2017 or 2018 to be a mentor within the program. And so I was the first person who had gone through it and came back as a mentor. And so it became such a passion for me because I had been there, done that. I knew exactly, what the path was that these entrepreneurs were walking. And there's a lot of ways where I'm like, I'm not qualified to do this yet. I'm still a startup.
Yeah.
But thankfully, Wes, saw the passion in me and pulled it out of me. So it was really fun to be a part of that and to see a transition from that into a show that enables us to really expand the reach of what we're doing has been such a powerful experience, and now we were on season 8. He just finished filming season 21, and it's grown, is bigger now than it's ever been before. So it's thousands of people who have been able to come through that program. And it's a life-changing program. Like people are every time, it never ceases to amaze me. Like every time people are just, this is the greatest week of my life. I can't believe all the things I've learned. And then, but it's the same thing. And the community that they've gained from being a part of it is just amazing. So that's why I stick around. I don't, the part of it of like, I didn't do it because I wanted to be on TV, which is good because it's not like the show's not yet, airing on, NBC or something like it. Maybe it'll get there someday, but if you're not in it for the right reasons, then my experience is you won't last long anyway.
Yeah.
And so, but to be able to go and speak into to people's lives like that, and just to be part of that community is a really, really special thing.
Well, it's like the old saying, right? Your network is your net worth. And I think that's powerful, right? And I just think well, you said season 8. I had another guest on earlier today and I said season 12. I really forgot, but yeah, you're right. It was season 8. But I think if I could pick out just a couple stories from our season, right? Like obviously, I invested with a couple girls that were contestants on there. They were back here from Ohio, and I basically funded their startup coffee shop, right? Like that was like $100,000. So I guarantee you that when they went out to compete on that show, they never thought maybe I'll find an investor that's going to give us $100,000, right? Now,
Right.
I don't think I'll ever see that money back, Justin, but that's okay.
Right.
Because I felt good helping them start up and kind of get things rocking. But for them, that really did change. Well, at least one of them now, that changed their life and what they were doing in their life. But I think to another real estate guy that was out there that was trying to, wholesale and flip some homes. And we didn't talk a lot out there. He was in my pod. We had some great conversations. I gave him some great coaching. But this is kind of one of the cool things that happened from it is in our pod, when I was giving him some coaching, he was trying to be everybody, or he's trying to be everything to everybody, right?
Right.
And I remember what I told him, I said, listen, what you need to do, and he had like all these different brands, like Mullet Man buys houses and things like that. And I said, what you need to do is you need to niche down and you need to become very, very precise and targeted with your marketing, right? Find a stationary market somewhere that you can hammer on that's not blowing up. Houses are, there's a good entry level to them. And then create this marketing for just that piece. Because he was doing like these big regional campaigns and all this stuff. And I remember a couple months after we left that show, he sent me a message on social media. He said, hey, man, I did what you told me to do. I finally found a market. Here's how I'm advertising it. And we are absolutely killing it. And it was like that episode that made me, or not that episode, but that message made me feel like really fulfilled. I'm like, okay, so somebody was listening. And there's like several other stories that I could go on about that are all wrapped into that. And I don't think people really understood that. Now, when they came out of the show, there was really two courses they could go. They could take the momentum, the energy, and all of the new connections that they made. They could take that and they could make that the gasoline, their jet fuel, and it could propel their business, or they could go back home and they could suck. And if they made the right decisions, something like that could really help their business. But I guess the point of that whole thing is like people should not be afraid to invest in themselves and to invest in networking. And, whether it's a mastermind, whether it's an incubator, whether it's a mentor, make sure you pick the right fit for you and somebody that really knows what they're doing. But those things are just so powerful. And I had a great time. And I'm glad we got to meet out on the blocks. And I have so many good friends from there. I really love it. And you're right, we should have a reunion sometime soon. But you mentioned to me before we jumped on something that we really haven't talked about on the show, and that a lot of people don't understand. But you mentioned that you've been working with kind of like an exit consultant, right? So for those watching that maybe don't understand what an exit consultant is when you have a business, what is it? Like, explain it to people.
Yeah, this is a very good example of when I say you got to recognize what stage you're at and work hard to maximize that stage. About a year ago, I recognized like, oh, we've built something that can stand on its own. So what is next? What does it look like? And so one of the things that I've done is engaged this exit consultant, and it's basically to prep. He'll come in and analyze the business and say, hey, if something happened to you, could the business run on its own? Does it stand on its own two legs? If you decided you wanted to sell the business, are you ready? And it's a really big question because most people, if they haven't thought about it, it's a 3 to 5 year process to
Mm-hmm.
actually get their business ready to sell if they want to maximize the value out of
Sure.
it. And some of the things that kind of scared me into doing this are the statistics around business owners are not great. Like when business owners sell, it's 90% of the time it didn't sell for what they thought it was worth. And within a year, I think it's 75% of business owners who have sold their company regret it within a year. And so this guy specifically that I'm working with helps me look at it holistically because for so many of us, our entire identity is wrapped up in what we've done and this baby that we've built from the ground up. And so when you don't have it anymore, what's next? And so there's a multifaceted thing of, will you be ready to sell if the time comes? Do you understand the weight of that? Are we going to be able to get the maximum value out of it? And then what are you going to do afterwards? What does life look like when all of that's said and done? Because it's really easy to think like, oh, once that money is in my account, life will be great. But that's not, as we know, money doesn't buy happiness. And so that money doesn't change you, it can reveal a lot about you. And so I don't want to be the guy that isn't prepared for that day. And here's what's great about it. As I've been working through that with this guy, it reveals some holes where it's like, okay, yeah, we can fill those gaps and correct those things. But it makes our business way healthier. It's equipping me to serve my customers now, serve them better. And that is a huge benefit for me of like, okay, even if I don't sell for 5 years, just going through this process and going through this exercise is a really good for me for somebody else to come in, look at it from a high level and tell me what my weaknesses are and where I need to shore things up.
Yeah, one of the other things I talk a lot when I mentor people is having continuity plans, which is exactly the same thing you're talking about, right?
Right.
And even if you're not going to sell your business, going through that process and hiring somebody that's professional with that. And here's the deal: if you're a smart entrepreneur and you've educated yourself and you're in a different phase than maybe some newer entrepreneurs, you might know the proper way to exit, right? Like I can. Some of my different businesses, I know exactly how to exit that. I know I don't need a consultant to come in, but I think it's always important to bring in a third party, unbiased opinion to really pick you apart, right? And in a
Right.
positive way that makes you think about things and challenges you in ways that you won't do, you know? And I kind of one of the scenarios with my wife, I got us into this developmental disability and mental health group home thing through real estate. 3 years ago, I bought a business, right? And I will say what you said a minute ago was very spot on. Most business owners that sell, they don't get exactly what they wanted, and they regret it afterwards. And the person that I bought this from, I felt bad about the deal. I got a crazy deal, okay? And it was like 7-8 months later, the wife that was involved in this, she actually tried to sabotage our company because part of the deal was we
Wow.
couldn't get our license for a year. Despite college degrees that my wife had, like all the nursing and stuff, she had to have like one specific year with the developmental disability population. So we couldn't get a license for a year for her. So we had to keep the owner's wife on for a year, because she had been working in that space and she was staying on as our CEO. And things just started spiraling. Like she became very negative about the sale because I guess she didn't want the sale of the company to go on. And, we said to ourselves, I said, man, she's going to try to do something to the company. She's going to try to sabotage it. And just for whatever reason, we went and we got a couple external hard drives and we started backing up all the computers with different sources to where she didn't know that they were. And sure enough, a couple weeks after we did that, got a phone call, said, hey, Todd, Lisa, I feel so bad. I feel horrible. Everything on the computer is erased. All of the files are gone. I don't know what happened. I said, oh my gosh, that's so horrible. That's horrible. That's the worst news I've had all week. But the good news is you don't have to worry about it. We backed everything up on hard drives just last night was our final backup.
Wow.
So we got everything. We got all the files. Tell me what you need. I'll send it right over to you. She's like, oh, you do? Oh, that's great.
That's great. Right.
But what that told me is like, yes, while they thought they wanted to sell at the time because they were dealing with some type of pain point, they didn't really want to sell. And
Right.
when you bring in an outside consultant, those are things that they challenge you on, like just simple stuff like you're thinking about selling. Why do you want to sell? Like, tell me the truth. It's like going to a therapist, right? Like, tell me the truth that maybe you won't even tell your wife or your friend or your best
Right.
friend or your buddy or whatever. It's like, why do you want to sell? And everybody's reason is different. But at the end of the day, having that third party in there to give you a very unbiased opinion of your company and your organization, or they might find something that like, look, you just suck at and you never realized it. And you can fix it. So I would tell everybody, don't be afraid to bring a third party in, even if it's just another entrepreneur that you trust. But what you're doing is perfect. Having an exit plan, whether that's selling it or what happens. Like, I don't know how involved your wife is with a company, but what happens if the unfortunate happens tomorrow and you're involved in a car accident or you get paralyzed or you pass away or, like, does your wife know where the bodies are buried? Right. Like that's it.
Right.
Or does somebody hold the keys to the kingdom if you're not there? So, kudos to you, man, for going through that process.
Well, yeah, and it's just such a fascinating deal. It's a vulnerable thing for someone to come in and point out the holes in our business. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with even a year ago when I started this was, oh, if I sold, what are my motivations? And part of it is you realize like, well, it'd be nice to not have to deal with the day in and day out headaches, but what I've really had to come to grips with is when I coach startups, one of my opening lines is, hey, if there's a problem with your business, it's you. Sorry, I've got really bad news. Like it's you. Here's the good news. You're also the solution, right? So no one's going to come fix it for you. So sitting around complaining about it's not going to do you any good. You find a solution and fix it and move on. And so I have to come to terms with the fact of like, oh, if I'm selling it because the day to day is a pain or it doesn't look the way I want it to look or something like that, it's actually on me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my fault that it's gotten to this point. It's my fault that I feel that way. And so what can I do to fix that? And so it was actually really sobering and eye-opening of like, oh, hey, if I can't figure out how to do that, guess what? When I'm not doing this anymore, whatever my day-to-day is at the next stage of life, it's also going to happen to me instead of me happening to it. So I got to figure out how to shape my life and my day-to-day into something that I want it to be, regardless. That's a skill I need to develop. And I need to be, it's like you're saying, like, I don't work with people that I don't want to work with. It's like, it's that same type of thing of like, oh, I actually have to be very intentional about this part and shape it the way I want it to be. And so that's been a really interesting process. As we've built this stuff, guess what's naturally happening? Oh, the healthier my company is, the less I have to deal with those things that are really painful. I'm finding ways to bring people in that can help deal with that, or farm that out to employees that I have, whatever the case may be. And it's just getting healthier and healthier. And at the same time, the value of the company is increasing because of it. And so it's just, as it's like there's no shortcuts here. There's no magic pill. There's nothing that happens overnight that's gonna change everything and make everything great. But by putting in the work in and day out, you can actually build something that's really special. And in my case, part of what that means is that it's a transferable asset. And in the meantime, the people who are involved with the company, like my motivation has changed. I want the company to do well now because I care so much about the people who are involved in it. And so I haven't even counted up, but between my two sales guys alone, their two families have 19 children between the two families.
Oh, wow.
And these are all homemade, one at a time, husband and wife families that they just love kids. So they both have a bunch of kids. Well, first of all, for one, if you want a motivated salesperson, hiring somebody with a bunch of kids I don't have to do anything to motivate them. They are very motivated to sell. But also they're great guys and all that stuff too, which is a lot of fun. But it's like when I think about like that, of like, oh, working here has actually changed their families' lives for the better, and that is a really, really special thing. That's what I'll take with me whenever it is that I do leave. Like those are the things I'll take with me. Is like, oh, there's whole families that have been very, very much changed for the better by being a part of this. Who cares about trailers? Who cares about if we eked out an extra sale this week or not? If we're not doing it the right way, then none of that stuff matters at all. And if I leave it, there's so many business owners that leave a wake of destruction and pissed off people behind them. And if you're doing that, then what is it? It doesn't matter. I don't respect it. It has no, you're not bringing any additional value to people. And so even as I consider leaving, like I want it to be something where when I am done, I can look back at it and go, yeah, there's not just a good company, but we brought a lot of value to a lot of people.
Yeah, but look, you're a different breed, man. And what you just said there says it all. And that's why like there was a natural attraction from me to you and to Michael. It's because when you meet other entrepreneurs, you can tell. You can tell who's the
Right.
real deal and who really cares. And you know what? The older we get, the more emotional we get, the more clap we have. Like, it's just I don't know. I tend to cry a little bit more now when things happen with my kids, and I was never like that. But
100%.
you know what? The fulfillment that you get out of seeing others have success, money can't buy that, man. Like it's
No.
just so rewarding. And yes, I love money. I like doing nice, great things. I like luxury vacations. I like being in Vegas and dropping stacks on the blackjack table and everything else. But
Right.
nothing compares to allowing my family to live the life that they want to live. And by
Right.
seeing other people that come into my orbit have success and go from living paycheck to paycheck to being able to actually be stable and have financial freedom and things like that. It's just it's so rewarding, man. Well, dude, Justin, we're running out of time, man, but uh we haven't even got it in there yet. If so, and what makes me mad is this. I have a buddy on social media and I've had his food truck at my house a couple times. And it was, I don't know, probably about a month ago I saw his first post. He had like this new
Oh my gosh.
beautiful food truck trailer. And his name, if he's listening, is Michael. And he has Let's Eat food truck. And the food is great. I love it. But I was pissed off. I'm like, how are you going to go build a food truck trailer and not even tell me so I can hook you up with my guy,
Right.
Justin?
Right.
But it looks great. It made me think about you a lot. And I
Hey,
think
maybe he did get it from us. Who
he
knows?
he might have. I don't know. I didn't ask him. It'd be really. I mean, actually, I'm gonna ask you to find out where he got it at. But it made me think about you. And I think the cool thing is like if you're traveling all around the country, like there's probably food trucks in almost every damn big city you go to that your company has built.
100%.
But if somebody wants to find you, if they're interested in that, if they just want to reach out and have a connection with you, how do they find you, man?
Yeah, Custom Trailer Pros is the name of the company, and that's our tags on all social media, YouTube as well. I've spent the last year building a lot of content for YouTube. And then if anybody wants to follow me personally on Instagram, it's just Justin.Prestige on there. And it might be the most boring Instagram account that you've ever seen, but I do connect with people there. I'm not like I'm that guy that's like, who cares? Nobody cares about my life or what I had for breakfast this morning. But I do like to post on some of the coaching stuff and just life in general. My wife and I, with our 4 kids, moved into the country a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
so we're doing that lifestyle of we've got chickens and dogs and a pond that we fish, and I hunt the woods behind our house and all that stuff. So we're kind of doing that lifestyle as well. So you'll get a little bit of that in there too.
Well, you got a beautiful
But
property. I've seen it. So keep posting more, and you have a gorgeous family, and man, you're doing it right, dude. You're kicking on all cylinders. You're doing it right. You're the epitome of what an entrepreneur should be like, dude. And I know you inspire so many people that you touch all the time. So thanks for being you.
well, I appreciate that, Todd, and likewise to you as well. You've got such a beautiful family as well. If we're not doing it for those guys, then like, what else matters, And so I know how much you value and love your family too. And so it's such an honor to know you and to be able to stay in touch. It's been so fun. Um, I mean, honestly, I've been a part of several seasons of the Blox, and most of them you leave and you lose touch with people. But that core group that we got to know each other out there it's a really, really quality group, and you're just such a big part of that. It's so fun to see people doing it the right way, like yourself, and to just remain part of that. You know what I mean? Like I want to be around other people who care about this stuff and who are doing it the right way. And like you, I have so little time for people who want to BS their way through this or make themselves look like they're something that they're not. So anyway, I appreciate you and love being on the show. And I genuinely look forward to doing it with you in person sooner than later.
Yeah, likewise. So many gold nuggets that you guys just heard in the show. My man Justin dropping it all. So many great things to take back and deliver in your business or when you develop a business. So go back, watch the show multiple times, slow it down, listen to all the points that we talked about with employing people and just a mindset with entrepreneurship, and don't miss a single golden nugget. So until next time, we'll see you.
Hold up, why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me. You waiting on the boy to fail, then hold your breath and face your death. Cause you play a roulette with each step I progress, no less. Go ahead and place your bets, cause we know where we at, we know we top tier. Cause all the hate that you bring, we know it stops here. I'm taking off like a rocketeer, ain't stopping here. It's strange how they cannot see the future, but